Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast where we talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring what the world has to offer. We're the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
I'm Ethan, and today we're going to talk about humility. This is a really interesting topic, and I think we can both use a little taste of humility in our life. I think we all can. I think at all times.
Voluntary humility.
Yeah,
hopefully
seriously.
Not forced humility.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to us. We're going to share some personal experiences, some stories that we liked, and then we're all going to learn together how we can become more humble.
Let's do it.
You can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in a pocket.
We will not go quietly into the night.
They tell me you're a man with true grit.
I am the one who knocks. Don't ever tell me what I can't do, ever!
That's how winning is done.
So, humility is it's an interesting topic, let's say. And I was talking with my wife about this podcast that we're going to be recording, and I asked her, what's the definition of humility? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, it's the absence of pride. I said, well, that's not really a definition, because then what's pride? Oh, well, it's the absence of humility. And it's just kind of like the same. So at some point you have to set a specific definition to what one or the other of those are. But in talking about humility, I just went to Google and typed in humility, and this is the definition that it put out for me. I'll just go ahead and read it. So it says, humility is the quality of being humble. Dictionary definitions accentuate humility as low self-regard or sense of unworthiness. And that's like the dictionary definition of humility.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I quite liked that.
I didn't like those either.
Yeah.
I dropped a piece of paper here. So one of the things I also found when I said the dictionary version was a modest or low view of one's own importance.
Yeah, I was like,
I didn't like that because it sounded like a weakness.
Yeah, or like self-esteem issues. It's not like oh, I'm I
have a low view of my importance.
Yeah, like I don't know. Yeah, it just didn't sit right with me. You still you can be humble and confident at the same time, I feel like.
Yeah. So
I kind of wrote my own definition of what maybe I thought humility was. Obviously, there's lots of different facets to it, and maybe you can share what the rest of yours was. But I said humility to me is understanding your own personal worth and value, but at the same time helping others understand and grow their own personal worth and value. And so it's kind of, I understand who I am. I understand, maybe what my purpose and value is, or my personal worth. But at the same point, I want other people to feel that same, confidence of self-worth and personal value. And so I'm always lifting other people up.
Yeah.
That's kind of what humility was to me, is that, you get to a point and then you help other people get to a certain point, or other people help you get to a certain point of personal feeling of personal worth and value.
Yeah. I think that concept of humility being acknowledging the worth of other people, I think that is important. And that's something that I've run across in my research of this topic, is acknowledging that. One of the things I wanted to share, and for those who can see on YouTube, I have a piece of paper here, and this is one of my goals this year was to do a topic every month, an attribute. Really, in our home, we're talking about attributes of Christ, because that's who we want to be like. And so this month is humility. And what we do is I met with my boys, and I only have boys. So met with them and said, okay, this month we're learning about humility. What is humility? And really kind of the kid-friendly definition that I settled on was kind of not thinking that you're better than anybody else. Some of the other definitions I liked was, and I liked more of like the religious definition of that, because I feel like it speaks in terms of more of like a strength than like a modest or low view of your own importance. Because that piece is leaving out leaning on the Lord. I like this one that says freedom from pride or arrogance. Another one, this one is more religious, but it's desire to submit to the Lord, the desire to seek the Lord's will and glory, desire to remove pride. And so that willingness and disposition to lean on the Lord and trust in the Lord with all thine heart is really what I think humility is, and not having the pride and arrogance. And some of the stories that I have today kind of reflect that. So that was my definition.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but one of my personal stories is in becoming more humble, and how one becomes more humble is serving others.
Yes, definitely.
And I've got a couple examples of that. I'll start out with just an easy personal story. When I was, probably about halfway through college, right before I got married, I went to do door-to-door summer sales. And so I was doing that, and we were in a couple different places, but the last place we were in was in southern Texas. We were like a mile from the Mexican border. It was kind of the middle of the desert, and our job was we were going door to door and selling home automation whenever it kind of just was coming out, and security systems. So, some days were really good, and other days were brutal, right? So I remember this one specific...
And hot, I'm sure.
Yeah, I remember this one specific day. It was like 105, 110 degrees outside, and it was just blistering. This was like in the late July, early August, and it was the middle of the desert, really, and there wasn't any tree cover. And how it worked was basically you got dropped off in your, what we called your area. You have a designated area, a neighborhood, or a couple blocks that you worked that specific day, and you got dropped off at 11 o'clock, and then they came and they picked you up at 11 o'clock a.m., and they came and they picked you up at 9 o'clock p.m.
What?
Yeah.
So did you have to pack your own lunch and stuff?
Yeah, you had to pack your own lunch, or basically we would just eat before we left. We'd eat like a big lunch at like 11 o'clock, and then we'd go right to our areas.
Dang.
And I remember this one day, it was so hot, and I mean, I was just dripping sweat, and there was no cover from shade, or there's no cover from the sun or shade. And it was a rough day. You got tons of rejection. You get used to rejection whenever you're in that industry, but it just wasn't getting into anybody's homes and talking to them, and wasn't making any sales. It was brutal. And I remember I was standing there, and I was like, man, this sucks. And I just kind of sat down on the curb, and I was just kind of pep talking myself. I was like, some days are like this, but yesterday was a good day, and tomorrow will be better. And I sat down on the curb and was just sitting there, and I probably sat there for like, I don't know, 5 minutes, and out of nowhere, this lady kind of came walking across the street, and she was walking towards me, and I was thinking, oh man,
a potential customer.
No, no. I was thinking, I had the cops called on us all the time. Oh, people don't like door-to-door salesmen, and I understand why now that I have a home and get them all the time. But I was like, oh, she's gonna tell me to get out of here, and she's gonna call the cops, and so I was kind of prepping for that. But she comes over, and she had a little baggie, and she said, "You look like you're really tired." And
that's the understatement of the century.
Yeah, and she goes, I was watching you from the window, and I just wanted to let you know that people care, right? And she gave me like a cold can of soda or Sprite or something, and a cold bottle of water, and like a snack of like some pretzels and stuff. And we sat there, we talked for a second, and I said, well, can I pay you for this or whatever? And she's like, no. He's like, I don't expect payment for acts of kindness. Mm-hmm. And then she went back in her house, and that was probably the most refreshing bottle of water I've ever drank in my entire life. But humility, how does this relate to humility, right? I think simple acts of kindness like that just continue to prove that, people are good. This was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people are still good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think people
are
are still good. But it was something that for me, somebody, humbled themselves enough to be able to come out and do something nice for somebody, and somebody they had no idea who they were, just some random guy. And that stuck with me. And I have had the opportunity to do similar things like that for people that I have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think little acts of kindness like that can really, it humbled me as a person to say, oh, people are nice.
Yeah. I think with that situation, it helps you see others in the same situation. Kind of a small. You just reminded me of a similar story that when after I had my first child. I mean, you put your kid in the car seat. I mean, you're in the hospital and you're like, "Don't break the baby,"
Been
and
there.
And then you like put it softly in the car seat, and then you go get in your car, and you're like, "I have to drive on the road with this baby," and like I don't know if most guys are, but I was pretty nervous to go out on the road with this baby that we had just gone through hell basically to get to Earth. And I was driving pretty freaking slow on the way home, and I'm like, you know what? I'm sure that maybe someone behind me is pissed off that I'm driving slow, and that always stuck with me. I'm like, as I'm driving, I'm like, I don't know the situation of the person in front of me. I don't know why they're driving the way they're driving. I don't know why they're slow. Maybe they just got in a fight with their spouse. Maybe they're having major issues with their kids. Maybe their parents have died. Maybe lots of different situations. Maybe the guy lost his job today. Maybe they just had a brand new baby and the guy's driving slow because he wants to be safe. And so like that experience kind of gave me empathy towards other people that might be in the same situation. And it kind of humbled me in that my own importance didn't supersede their importance. And I think that's what humility is like you realize that other people's worth and you recognize their situations, and your importance doesn't supersede theirs.
Yeah, I think our experiences help us to understand, at least to a certain extent, maybe other people's experiences.
Yeah.
Not that we're comparing experiences, because everybody's different. Everybody's experiences are different, but I like that.
Yeah, one of the stories I had thought of that isn't quite along the lines of what you were talking about. It's a little bit different. I think that humility can also be the key to learning things. Because if you have pride and arrogance, which is what we've talked about as the opposite of humility, you're not going to be receptive enough to learn anything, especially from anybody, really. The other day, I went to the range, the gun range, the pistol range, actually, and I joined this new club, and it's like this big deal where the club is like this private club, and it's like 100 acres of shooting, and they have all this set up, and you have to like qualify to be able to shoot there. So I'm like a conditional member, and they assigned me a mentor to kind of watch me and make sure I'm not like some kind of lunatic. And then after like 6 months of this trial period, maybe I can become a full member. And so anyway, I'm in there, and I connected with my mentor, and I went in there, and I've been shooting for a while, but I'm not an expert by any means, but I think I know my way around a pistol, and enough not to hurt myself or anybody else, at least intentionally. And so I went, and he was like, "Hey, well," he was like, "Show me your stance," and I showed him my stance, and it was like the most. And he's like, "Okay, first of all, your feet are off." And he's like, I had a wide foot stance, like I was like a linebacker, like a cornerback, just ready to run, And he's like, your stance is off. He's like, if you have to move forward, maybe you'll do good, but if you have to move backwards at all, you're gonna fall over. And he's like, second, I had my head cocked to the side, like I was looking through a scope in a rifle. He's like, first of all, don't cock your head like that. Hold your head straight up, and then move the gun to your eye. And I was like, okay. He's like, second of all, your hands are wrong. I had my hand like a cup and saucer, like my one palm was like under holding in like the clip, and then he's like, that's the wrong way to do it. And he's like, you're not gripping the gun right. And then when I was pulling the trigger, I was like jerking the end of the barrel down, and so all my shots were down. And so like he was just teaching me all this stuff, and I was just like, I don't know anything about how to really shoot a pistol correctly. The movies don't teach you anything, and my dad taught me how to shoot a pistol, but he wasn't like the perfect marksman either or anything like that.
Firearms instructor.
But this guy taught me a lot of good tips, and I was just like soaking it up. I was just like, "You're absolutely right, absolutely right." And then like one time, I kept shooting it. I kept jerking the trigger a little bit. When I would pull the trigger, I would pull the end of the barrel down a little bit. And he's like, "You're anticipating the shot." And so what he did is he just like he actually had me hold the gun. He's like, "You aim the gun, and I'll pull the trigger." And then he's like, "This is like the movie Ghost, where Patrick Swayze's behind her, like doing the clay,
the pottery." Yeah.
And so I just did it. And I aimed it, and he pulled the trigger because he said that when I was going to shoot, I would anticipate that, and I would
try to compensate the recoil going up by you pushing down.
Yeah, well, yeah, something like that. And he pulled the trigger, and it was just boom, almost dead on where I was trying to shoot. Except for, I will say that my sights were a little bit off, so I need to adjust those. But still, it was just really amazing being able to learn from him. And I think that me being able to set aside any pride that I had over like, "Hey man, I know how to shoot. This is the way I've always been shooting." If I was to act like that wouldn't serve me at all. I would be a crappy shooter still. So like setting aside that really allowed me to learn and soak up everything that he was teaching me because it was good. All of it was good. And there's something you can learn from everybody, no matter even if it's someone that you think is an underling or like a junior employee. There's always something you can learn. Just always listen.
I like that humility kind of prepares us for learning experiences.
Yeah.
Because if you're just completely closed off, or if you're, I'm an expert, or I know what I'm doing, and then you don't open up, then there's not really any room for improvement if you already think you're the best.
Yep.
I like that. So another story kind of that I had is taking another facet of humility, and maybe this is more talking about the pride portion of that. But a personal story for me is, we talked about this in the overcoming failures episode, and basically for me, after my experience of not getting into dental school, I was really angry. I was angry. I was hurt. I was embarrassed. And I was angry because I thought that I deserved more.
Yeah.
I thought that I worked hard. I put in the hours. I paid the money to go back to school. And I put in all this effort, and then I felt like it wasn't being rewarded.
Yeah.
Whether that's entitlement or pride or arrogance, whatever it may be, I was just angry because I felt that other people had done the same thing or less, and they were successful and I was not. And, at that time, and this was years ago, but I was just angry, and Caitlin she'll attest to it too, that I was kind of miserable to be around because I was bitter with the world. And anytime I saw anybody that had any ounce of success, it was always like, "Oh, well, they don't deserve that." Or, what did they do that I haven't done? And I was short with the kids, and I was short with her, and I was just quick to get angry, and it just wasn't a good situation. I was being prideful. Then one day, and I remember the day we were, I had someone who I really respected one time come up to me and ask me just directly, "Ethan, are you okay?" And I took that opportunity to open up a little bit, and I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't okay. And this really opened the door for me to start the healing process. I started researching humility, and that person who I respected said, "You're being prideful." and I said, well, how am I being prideful? I'm broke and I'm, whatever this and isn't that, I'm a failure. And he's, I said, well, I'm not this rich to-do person that is just being prideful because I drive my Mercedes and you drive a 98 Honda Civic or whatever.
I think that's the misnomer about pride. Is
100%.
Yeah.
And he said, you're being prideful. And I was like, well, how so? And we talked a lot about it, and I researched pride and everything. And I prayed to help understand it, but pride isn't always from the top down. It can be from the bottom up. Pride is the opposite of humility, and I was not being humble. I did not want other people to succeed because I felt like I hadn't succeeded, which in looking back at it was a farce because I had, an amazing family, healthy kids and family to support me in everything that I was doing. So,
pride can blind you.
Yeah. So
what you have.
So that helped me, to kind of turn the tides to being more humble. But I would say probably the one thing, and this is going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, that really opened the door and switched my mentality was I was given the opportunity to serve and to serve a lot. And in that service, it was a calling at our church. That was an opportunity that had lots of responsibility that came along with it. And obviously, in our church we don't have any paid ministry, so it was all service oriented.
Yeah.
And in that service, I kind of found myself. Right.
Yeah.
I it's hard to be prideful whenever you're serving someone and helping others, not only helping people that you might feel don't need the help, but everyone. I had the opportunity of serving people that were millionaires, and I had opportunity of serving people that were, could barely, or couldn't afford to heat the home or the trailer in the winter.
Yeah.
And so that to me was a huge lesson, probably my biggest lesson in life on humility and pride. And sometimes I have to check myself. Sometimes I find myself doing that again, and I have to say, well, I don't want to diminish other people's successes to make either myself look better or them look worse.
Yeah.
Which was just that's an interesting story.
That's very interesting.
It was very impactful to me.
And I think like entitlement and pride are hand in hand. Those they're married, because if you are entitled, you say, well, I deserve this because, like you said, I've worked this hard and I deserve this. And like, well, really, you don't deserve anything. And like, there's a few, like, I think inalienable rights that you deserve, but like,
yeah, I understand where you're going.
But like, you don't you're not entitled to anything. Is really what I, I'm getting at, and I think that's so good, and also just being aware of that, and being cognizant of that. So if those feelings do creep up in your gut, sometimes you're like, no, I know what this is, and I know how to alleviate this. And I know that this is like a poison that just comes from within.
Yeah, it helped me. It helped teach me how to identify that in my life. And I am not perfect whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And, I have tons and tons of growing still to do. Mm-hmm. But hopefully I can take that lesson. And, you talked about teaching your boys and your kids what these things mean. We were sitting around the dinner table tonight, and we were having conversations with our boys about, why do we need to be nice to other people?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we need to let other people walk all over us. And that is one thing I want to say about humility. Humility isn't, and this goes back to what you're saying about being, a lot of times humility goes along with weakness.
Mm-hmm. Or people perceive it as a weakness.
People perceive it as that. But I don't think that, I 100% do not feel that it's a weakness.
No, I don't either.
But it is not an excuse to let people walk all over you. Someone might be saying, in life, that jerk or that arrogant guy or whatever, we've all worked with them before. Sometimes it seems like they always, get the promotion, or they always get whatever, and but people know that guy. People know that guy is the jerk. Or people know that guy is the arrogant one who is just not kind and not humble and not whatever. And the cream rises to the top.
One of the things that I was researching is like at one point I was like, well, like I also want to be assertive, and I don't want to sacrifice my assertiveness to be humble. And those two can coexist. You can be assertive and you can communicate clearly about what you want. You can communicate clearly about what your thoughts are and feelings are in a respectful manner that is also humble. Being humble is listening to others' opinions, listening, value, understanding that they are worth something too. But you can be assertive and also humble at the same time. And I think that humble leaders are really the ones that do well, and that we should admire. I have a story here that's kind of cool. This is something that should be in like what are those romance Hallmark channels? Maybe they could make a Christmas movie.
Christmas
out of it.
Hallmark, yeah.
Yeah. So
my wife would watch it.
Yeah, exactly. So this one, Samuel Morse, name might sound familiar to you, or at least the last name, was born into a preacher's home in New England just 2 years after George Washington was elected the first president of the United States. Interesting. We talked about George Washington before and how he was almost made king, but that was cool.
But he was humble enough to say,
"That's right.
That's not what we just fought to get away from that. We don't want that."
Good man. Then he said, it says, after finishing his education at Yale, he went to England to hone his painting skill. Upon returning to America, he was recognized as a gifted artist and was soon in much demand. Morse's first wife died while he was away from home painting in Washington, D.C. He did not receive the news until it was too late. In his heartbreak, he turned away from painting and began trying to develop a means of rapid communication over great distances. This eventually led to his discovery of the telegraph. Despite his fame and many honors that came his way, Morse wasn't proud or boastful. In a letter to his second wife, he wrote, and I really like this quote, "The more I contemplate this great undertaking, the more I feel my own littleness, and the more I perceive the hand of God in it, and how he has assigned to various persons their duties, he being the great controller, all others his honored instruments, hence our dependence first of all on God, then on each other." And I think that is a perfect example, almost the definition of humility, first leaning on God, trusting in God. And he said, and I think that's so cool because the invention of the telegraph, Morse code, which is after his name, was revolutionary, that type of communication. And that was a spark that changed the world. And so, him realizing that his small place in all this, and that he felt that God was directing him to do these great things, and that he was an instrument in those hands, I think that's so cool. And I think that's kind of like, I'm like, well, I hope that I can find what my great duty is, so that I can be that instrument in God's hands too.
Yeah, that's great. I think just recognizing that, and I think it's okay to be a celebrity, or it's okay to be really well known and things like that. But from at least I'm not a celebrity yet. We're not celebrities yet. But
by the way, subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe, like our video, share it, please. But there are some people that are just more humble than others in their interactions with people, that they don't,
like Keanu Reeves. Have you ever seen Keanu Reeves on like the bus? Like he's like,
he's riding the metro. I mean, he's
giving up his seat to people. He seems like a very down to earth person.
Yeah, for sure.
One other quote I had here. This was from a guy named Dr. Brangle. He was one of the early Salvation Army guys that ran that. Just part of his quote here, I liked what he said because it was along the same lines. He said, "The axe cannot boast of the trees it has cut down. It could do nothing but for the woodsman. He made it, he sharpened it, and he used it. The moment he throws it aside, it becomes old and irony. It becomes only old iron. Oh, that I may never lose sight of this." He's talking about that in the reference of God using us as instruments in his hands. Kind of reminds me of, Thor in the last Endgame, where he's like, "Who killed Thanos?" And then the guy's like, Stormbreaker. And he's like, well, who was swinging Stormbreaker?
His axe.
So it's kind of the same thing, It's like being humble is being that axe in the hands of God to do the great works, and recognizing His hand in all things.
Yeah. My last example is I'd be remiss to not mention. We talked about experiences and stories about humility, the life of Christ and his humility, and there's countless stories in the scriptures about his experiences. But I mean, he walked with the poor, and he fed the poor, and he talked and conversated and worked with the lepers who were completely shunned from society and outcast, and all of the to-dos and the Sadducees and the Pharisees. They were, how dare you intermingle with these dirty people, and these sinners. And he truly understood not only his worth, but he understood their worth, and he wanted to bring them up. He wanted them to succeed. So that was...
Yeah, I think the ultimate expression of that is when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he said, pass from me this cup, but not my will, but thine be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he was ultimately at the most painful point in his entire life, subservient, and he was obedient to the Father. And that was... such that attribute of Christ is so important that I see that as such a strength and not any weakness in any regard.
Yeah. So
how can we be humble?
We learned about what it was, talked about some experiences.
We talked about a little bit about how we be humble. We talked about service.
Yeah, we did.
That was a major one.
Yep.
I also think we should pray for it. You also mentioned that. Pray for it. Pray for humility. Pray that we can be humble. Either you can pray to be humble, or God will humble you.
Actually,
and it's easier to do the former.
Well, I have something to confess. I try not to pray for humility, because I feel like if I pray for humility, then the Lord is going to give me an opportunity to be humble. I don't know if I really want that. I mean, that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but a lot of times I do. It's just kind of like, or maybe help me to understand, humility and to raise others up.
Yeah,
is big. So I had a couple quotes, and I'm just going to read some of these because I don't want to paraphrase too much of it. But there was a discourse or a talk, a speech given by Stephen Snow, and he said, as we raise our children, we need to help them remain humble as they mature into adulthood. We do not do this by breaking their spirit through unkindness or by being too harsh in our discipline. While nurturing their self-confidence and self-esteem, as we're talking about, we don't want them to be low self-esteem. By nurturing their self-confidence and self-esteem, we need to teach them the qualities of selflessness, kindness, obedience, lack of pride, civility, and unpretentiousness. So those are kind of the things that we need to teach our kids to have self-confidence and self-esteem, but we also need to teach them those things of selflessness and kindness, obedience, lack of pride, and talk about those things. Civility, what does it mean to be civil to someone else?
Especially someone that disagrees with you.
Yeah, 100%. And so it says we need them to learn to take joy in the success of siblings and friends, because at that point, what do kids know except for their siblings, their friends, their cousins, their family?
It's good. I like
we need
that.
to teach them to find success in other people's, or find joy in other people's success as well.
And don't take it as a threat to their own self.
Yeah, and that's hard to do sometimes, especially if there are two people at work going up for the same promotion. There's only one job. I want it.
Yeah.
I want the promotion, but then it's kind of hard if to say, oh, I want this other guy to succeed too if he's going to the same thing. Or in sports, in competition, you say, oh, well, I want the other guy. Well, I don't want him to succeed because I want to win the game. Yeah. But I think there's a balance in all things. We kind of talked about that earlier. There's a balance, and you can still want to win the game, but you can still want the other person to be successful and
Yeah.
healthy and everything else. The last part of this quote I thought was really powerful, and then I'll turn it over. But President Howard W. Hunter, who was the president of the church at a specific time, taught that our genuine concern should be for the success of others. If not, our children can become obsessed with self-promotion and outdoing others, jealousy and resentment for the triumphs of their peers. I am grateful for a mother who, when seeing I was becoming too full of myself as a boy, she would say, "Son, a little bit of humility right now would go a long way."
Yeah.
So just kind of teaching ourselves, we're talking about children here and how to teach children.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're all at stages of learning, and I think we can adopt any of these for our own lives.
One thing that that's excellent. I really like that. I was researching a little bit, and I found that there's actually been scientific studies done about the effects of gratitude and humility. And those two are actually mutually reinforcing each other. One study showed that when participants wrote letters of gratitude, they saw subsequent increases in humility, and also vice versa. That when people were humble, they on a day they could project that the next day that person would be more grateful, and so we talked about gratitude, attitude of gratitude, and we've talked about humility now, and how one of the quotes that I found that I really liked, what says that those two are twin characteristics of happiness, and that they feed off of each other. If you are humble, then you're going to be grateful. If you're grateful, then you're going to realize the worth of others, and you're going to be humble. So those two, that's why in our 2021 Reset Challenge, Wellness Challenge, we challenged everybody to do a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
And that will help you be humble, and that will help you be grateful. And that is the twin characteristics of happiness. We're peddling happiness here, people. We only want you to be happy. And
tell your friends.
Yeah. But we're trying to be happy too. And I've been doing my gratitude journal every single day this year. I've done perfect on my challenge this year. We're 2 weeks in at this point, but pound my chest.
Technically, it was released last week, so we're only 1 weekend, but that's fine.
Yeah, but we got the early early scoop.
Yeah,
but anyway, that's so important. And if you're humble, you'll get a twofer there, and you'll also be more gracious as well.
Yeah. Last kind of topic from that same talk I was mentioning earlier, says that think of all the heartache that can be avoided by humbling yourself to say, "I'm sorry. That was inconsiderate of me. What would you like to do? I was just thinking," or "I'm very proud of you." If these phrases were humbly used, there would be much less contention and more peace in our homes. Not that I always hate the phrase like, "Oh, just be the bigger man and or be the bigger woman and just say I'm sorry." It's like,
Mm-hmm.
but what if I'm not the one that's wrong? But in every situation, it's not always right and wrong. I mean, sometimes both of you are right. In an argument or a conversation, maybe you're just misunderstanding each other. And so just to kind of eliminate that and say, "You know what, I'm sorry," or "That was a dumb thing to say," or whatever else. It's kind of bite the bullet. And
That's one thing that Mom said. She's like, one way to always resolve an argument is to say, "You're probably right," because you're not admitting guilt. Yeah. You're not admitting that they're right, but you're not admitting that you're wrong. You're just like kind of ending the conversation.
It was in Megamind. He goes, "You were right, and I was less right." It's like his apology.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was important.
Yeah,
that can drive, kind of like you said, peace and joy in our homes, within our marriages, within our friendships, our relationships, and with our kids, our children. So
yeah. Well, one thing we like to do is we like to create quotes from us. One day we're going to maybe get a quote book that we should sell. Ethan and Jared quotes.
Yeah, wise words.
Wise words from the Brothers' Creed. So here's mine about humility. Humility is the doorway, and pride is the door. By removing pride or opening that door, great pearls of wisdom will enter your life by the mouth of others and by the mouth of God. The more you can get that door out of the way, the more blessings and wisdom can enter your life.
I like it. I like the analogy of the door and kind of getting it out of the way and
open that door wide open, and then just receive as much wisdom as you can. That pride is blocking everything.
I like it. And that's kind of like the humility leads to learning.
Yep.
Philosophy. So mine was, I was just going back and kind of reading mine, and I don't want to say it's morbid, but maybe it's more of a warning. And this is maybe driven by past experiences, but I came up with a quote of, when there is a lack of humility, it can lead to pride and judgment. This can lead to anger and destruction of relationships.
Yeah.
And like we talked about before, being humble can increase joy, and it can build those relationships and peace within our homes and in our relationships. But the lack of that can lead to anger and the destruction of the relationships that we have. And who are we without relationships? I mean, human beings are nothing without forming bonds and relationships with other people.
Yep. Man was not meant to be alone.
Yeah, I agree. And whether that's family or friends or coworkers or a boss or whatever it may be, this fits into every situation. We want to have healthy relationships, and humility is the key to a healthy relationship.
This has been great, man.
Yeah, this has been a really good one.
I think this is such a good. I just need to absorb all this part. Listen to this episode again. Just absorb everything because it's so great. Lots of good nuggets of wisdom shared here. But
so if you're listening to us, thank you for sticking it out with us. Like the video, give us a rating. If you're watching on YouTube, hello, and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, also subscribe to the podcast. We're not just saying that to follow us, but also if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, you actually get to see the episodes right when they're posted. We usually post Wednesday nights at about 9 o'clock, 8:30, and so I can see
you'll get to see them right away.
I get to see them right away. Whereas, heck, we posted one and I sent it to a buddy, and he didn't even see it like the next day at like 4 or 5 o'clock. And then he hit the subscribe button and it immediately showed it up. So if you subscribe, you'll see it sooner, and you'll be able to just devour all of our content.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time and listening with us in support of everyone out there. And let's all see if we can't be more humble and create stronger relationships and
build that creed together.
All right, let's do it.